Good morning. Three guesses where I am, huh? I'm sitting at the world's most wobbly table having some coffee in Jacksonville, as you might guess, at the landing, and waiting for a few more people to show up. It's a pretty decent morning here. Hi there. So like I said, this is the world's most wobbly table, so if you see a little shaking going on, it's just par for the course here at the landing. And thank you all for joining me. And so you may have seen the show Comedians in Cars Having Coffee. This is me sitting at a table having coffee with you. So here's to that, and happy Saturday to you. Question is, what is my brew of choice for fasting purposes? This is black coffee. And if anybody's unfamiliar, what we're talking about here is appetite correction, which means doing things that enable our body's appetite center to regulate properly so that we don't overeat, and if we have excess fat, we get rid of that. And so the bottom line here is appetite correction. And one of the best tools to achieve appetite correction is the intermittent fasting schedule called Fast-5, which has been around for more than 10 years, and it is a 19-hour fast, which includes sleeping, followed by a 5-hour window of eating opportunity, which can be any time of day. And most people set their eating window either between 1 and 6, maybe 3 and 8, or in my case, I go with 5 to 10 in the evening. And the rest of the time, from the time I wake up until I break my fast, which we call break fast, I'm not eating anything, and I'm only drinking things that don't have any significant calorie content, one of which is coffee. So we can have coffee together. And another question came up of, can I have cream in my coffee? And that's a good question. It came up in the Facebook group we have online. And it's a good question because a lot of people really don't like black coffee. And if you tend toward some of the better coffees, there's more flavor, it's tastier stuff, even when it's black. And so if you can find a brew that you like black, that's best. But because cream, and I'm talking real cream here, not the Cremora creamer or milk or anything, cream is almost all fat. And so it's conceivable that you could put some of that in your coffee, and it only takes a little bit of cream to have a pretty creamy effect. And you could probably get away with that and not have it really be a fast breaker. But what I've found from learning from all the people doing the Fast-5 over the past 10 years is that that's an individual matter. And you have to try it yourself. This is what we call the study of one. And if you're somebody who's very sensitive to what you eat, that could the cream in the coffee can be a fast breaker and start the appetite center saying, oh, let's go get some food, which then becomes very difficult to control. But for a lot of people, a little cream in the coffee is no big deal. But again, I do suggest sticking with regular cream rather than going with the creamer, which is fake stuff and not really fat, and thus can set off an insulin response, or avoiding the use of milk, which has lactose in it, which is a sugar, which also can set off the appetite response and start making you hungry and uncontrollable, take lots of willpower to suppress the urge to eat. But when you're fasting, it's not a big deal. So that's the story on cream in the coffee. And a question here about hearing kids in the background. I'm on the second floor of the landing. They're down on the first floor running around having a good time, as kids should do. And it's a reminder to us that we don't have to stop playing just because we're grown-ups. And that is an essential part of the other part of my diet program, which is the DIET did I enrich today? And that means that you consider 5 things as part of your diet, and not one of them is food. Food is one of the more minor concerns. There's novelty, there's challenge, there's meaning, and variety and play. And play is the one that the kids are partaking in right now, just running around screaming, having a good time. And it's a nice reminder to us to keep that in our play today. And another question here of what do you plan to do to play today? And I have to say this is a little bit play for me, having coffee out here on the landing. But it's not like all out play, but I'll have to figure out something else to do later on today. Why don't you send some notes on what you're going to do for play today, and I'll read them out as we come in. But first, coffee. How about that? So I'll go on to the other questions that have come up recently. And there was one question about lime or lemon juice in water. Does that constitute a break of the fast? And the lime or lemon juice in small amounts to flavor your water is just fine. It's not enough of a calorie content to be of significance. And there was a question here about, do I follow a specific diet? I don't follow a specific diet. My choices tend to be what you might consider healthy ones, a lot of green stuff, a lot of vegetables, a lot of salads, as trying to be the bulk of the meal. I don't eat much meat. On special occasions I might, and if I'm eating any kind of animal product, it's going to be fish most of the time, and red meat is pretty scarce, less than once a month on average, I'd say. So I don't have any prohibitions entirely against any particular thing, but in the interest of healthy choices, I aim for the green leafy stuff, and then some fruits, and then compared to what I used to eat years ago in the form of pasta and potatoes, that sort of thing, not so much. And in my book, I talk about the super BCPs, and the S in super BCP stands for sugar. And I used to think that sugar was pretty much just fuel, and our bodies would react to that just like they would any other fuel. But I have read more, learned more, seen more, and concluded that the abundance of carbohydrates in our diet, particularly with the simple carbohydrates like sugar, pasta, cereals, bread, potatoes, are all overdone. It's not that we shouldn't have any of those, but they should not be making up the majority of our intake. And so for that, I turn to the veggies, and that, as far as I could tell, is the optimal source for the bulk of the contents in our diet. And that helps our appetite centers stay in tune and regulates the rest of our body functions so that things turn out well. Okay, another question. Is it correct that you shouldn't break a fast with alcohol? Well, that's an interesting question. It depends on what your objective is. If your objective is, as one might say, firing for effect, breaking a fast with alcohol could be a very economical way to achieve that. You can have a variety of responses, and you need to figure out what your body does in particular. And so I would not recommend, in fact I would recommend against, breaking your fast with alcohol at any time before you have to drive. But if you're in a safe place, you can experiment a little bit and see what your body's reaction is. From the 10-year experience with Fast-5, we've had a number of responses from, on the one end, it's making somebody a cheap drunk. They get tipsy very quickly, and a very prompt response of intoxication. On the other hand, it seems like once you're past that, then the metabolism of alcohol after that is more steady, consistent, maybe even faster, and that it's if you don't have that rapid absorption at first and instead have your alcohol with food, you may actually find yourself to be more tolerant of alcohol over the course of a meal or course of an evening or something like that. So experimenting and learning about your body, what your body's response to in a safe place is wise. I'm getting a note here that I'm off the line, but the messages are coming up. So I think it's still working. And let me check something right quick. Seems like things are working. Thanks, Mimi. I see that you're seeing. All right, cool. So it's just one user that's having trouble. Okay, so it's a fun question about alcohol. Thank you. And so the answer pretty much comes down to the study of one again. Experiment in a safe place. See what your body does with it. And if you find yourself more sensitive than usual, then take that into account when you're having alcohol and go easy on it to start with. The next question that's come up is, what do you find is the biggest challenge with fasting? And that's a very good question. And we recently put out a survey in the Fast-5 group about what's the most difficult part about the Fast-5 schedule. And at this point, for fasting, I don't find anything particularly difficult. If there's a food that I see during the day that I want, I know I can have it in the evening, and I'm happy to have it then, whether it's a donut or whatever. And if there's a special occasion where I feel like I'm obliged to eat or it would just be more fun to eat, I go ahead and eat. No big deal. I can just resume my fasting schedule the next day. And it's not a big deal. And I know that if I keep that fasting schedule for the most of the day, then it will take care of my body, and I don't have anything to worry about. As far as other people, in terms of what they encounter as difficulties, I think the biggest one still, and for a long time, will be social. They keep hearing that fasting's not healthy, or you've got to eat breakfast, you've got to keep your metabolism up. And as intermittent fasting gets to be more and more popular, that kind of response is going to be going down, because it has been successful for so many people that it's growing and growing and growing. And as people understand that it doesn't mean not ever eating, it doesn't mean putting your body into some kind of fasting state where you're just going to turn into a wave or something like that. You can still be strong and active and have all the energy that you want. That's going to change things. But for now, I think the biggest trouble with starting an intermittent fasting cycle is the social friction that people get. And there are a couple of ways that one can deal with that. One is to not say that you're fasting. Don't use the F word. Use the S word instead. Now that would be schedule. You're on an eating schedule, an appetite correcting eating schedule, which abbreviates to ACES. And so you instead of saying fasting, which I understand, it puts people in the mindset of somebody like Gandhi, who's real frail and weak looking. Obviously not the case mentally, but in order to avoid that mindset, if you say you're on a schedule, that means you ate before, you're going to eat later, no big deal. And so I do tend to avoid the F word and describe it as an eating schedule. And when on an intermittent fasting schedule like Fast-5, where you're eating every day within a 5-hour window, that enables you to say, well, yeah, I'm going to eat later today, or I already ate, I'm fine, thanks. And so you don't even have to mention the F word, and so that sort of knee-jerk reflex of saying, oh, you're going to turn into a piece of spaghetti that's fragile and has no energy and just being this inert something, it doesn't have to happen. So that's my best solution for that. And as the practice of an appetite correcting eating schedule gets to be more and more popular, it will get easier and easier to adopt. And it'll be, hopefully, at some point, just kind of normal for people to say, it's not my time. Okay, so let's have some coffee instead, like we're having now. So how's that? Okay, I'll go on to the next question, and let's see what it is. Okay. Okay. That's kind of related. Um, how long can one fast without significantly damaging metabolism? And the the words damaging metabolism kind of make me kind of bristle at first because I don't really think we can damage our metabolism. A human body is an incredibly resilient piece of machinery, and no matter what condition your body is in, it is still a fantastic machine and deserves a lot of respect for the incredible resilience that it has. For example, the typical person, even without extra fat on board, can survive for 3 to 4 weeks without food. Not without water, but without food. And that kind of endurance is rare among animal species. Mice and rats, for example, could not survive nearly that long. A few days at most for rats. For mice. And maybe a little bit longer for rats, but they do wither up much more quickly than humans. And we can really outlast a lot of other animals because of the incredible resilience of our bodies. The range of adaptation that we have is incredible, and we have been able to endure all sorts of environments from Antarctica to the hottest deserts. We learn how to deal with those things, and we can learn how to deal with having too much food around. And that's what the intermittent fasting schedule does. There was a question that came up, any restrictions on certain types of foods. With Fast-5, the appetite-directed eating schedule, you choose your food according to what you think is most healthy. If you can imagine what you would, if you had a kid, what would you prefer that kid eat? If you can make the same kind of diet for yourself, that's one way to look at it. And you can make your best choices there, and there's room for some variety, there's room for some novelty, and you can have your indulgences from time to time, and it's no big deal. Your body just rolls with it, and things turn out well. Another question, thank you, Mimi. Do you find your fellow doctors are more accepting of fasting these days? And another good question, thank you. Yes, for many, and no for some. I've heard from people who have adopted Fast-5 that from time to time they go into their doctor's office and they've lost weight, things are looking good, and their doctor says, "What are you doing?" And they say, "Oh, I've been doing this daily fasting," and the doctor says, "Oh no, that's not healthy." And that unfortunately indicates that there is still a prevailing dogma of people who really don't understand what intermittent fasting is. They haven't been aware of the research, and even when I went through all of medical school, there was no education about this one thing that was known to extend life in animals. Why are we in medical school if we're not going to be extending people's healthy lives? So what I'm referring to is calorie restriction. Since the 1930s, it's been observed that calorie restriction will extend the healthy lifespan of animals. And that fact was just kind of overlooked, I guess, because no one really thought that humans could apply it to themselves. And the human lifespan is too long for us to really know whether or not it would have any effect. And so one of the jokes about it was that if you're on calorie restriction, your life may not actually be longer, but it's going to seem longer. So I can imagine that. And so I don't find calorie restriction to be a great way to approach this. I don't like counting calories. But intermittent fasting, on the other hand, where you don't have to count calories and you can have your occasional indulgences and you let your body take care of things, if it turns out to have life-extending effects, I'm all for that. If it doesn't, then I don't really feel like I've lost anything, and by maintaining an appropriate weight for my body, I know that I've reduced the risk factors for 9 out of the top 10 killers. So my chances of living a long and healthy life of a normal lifespan are at least increased, and that's something. Now, I mentioned that we can't really know whether or not calorie restriction or intermittent fasting extends human lifespans, and that's because human lifespans are already so long that it would be hundreds of years before we really knew whether or not people were dying sooner or later, depending on a change that they take in effect. Another question has come up about, is Fast-5 austere? There was a New York Times article that says that intermittent fasting is not sustainable. Well, I've been doing it for 10 years continuously and wouldn't choose anything else. And based on the survey results we had coming in over the last couple of days, a lot of people agree with that. One of the questions on the survey was, what's the worst thing about keeping the Fast-5 appetite correction schedule? And many of the responses actually said, quote unquote, nothing. Nothing's awful about it. It's quite sustainable. One of the responders commented that it was the easiest, most effective diet they'd ever seen. And as evidence sitting right in front of you, 10 years of continuous sustainability where I would not prefer to do it any other way. It feels too good. It feels too successful, too energetic, too effective to do anything else. And I know other schedules have come out, and I respect those. If they work for somebody, the 5 and 2 diet, if it works for somebody, great. If you feel good on it and it's working for you and it's sustainable for you, you're comfortable with it, awesome. Keep it up and power on. And same thing goes with any other of the other schedules. Brad Pilon has a similar 2-day fasting schedule to the 5 and 2 diet. It's an actual fasting schedule, though, instead of the reduced calorie that the 5 and 2 diet from Dr. Michael Mosley is. But if it works, great. But if it doesn't work, I certainly encourage anybody to try Fast-5. Another question here: have you ever increased your eating window since you've hit your ideal weight? In a way, I have, in that I've been more flexible. If the say a social occasion comes up and I'm only at the 4 o'clock hour, and I typically open my window at 5 o'clock, then I'll just open the window at 4 and not give it a second thought. And so I just trust my appetite to take care of things. I don't deliberately close my window earlier to compensate for it, because I don't have to. But also, once I get my fill, I'm not even keeping track of the time of closing the window anymore anyway. It just takes care of itself. I'm usually not eating later than about maybe 8:39 at the latest anyway, so I'm not even coming close to my window closing time on most occasions, so I don't worry about it. Okay? We've been on here for a while. I still got coffee, and we'll have some of it, and I hope you've had a good time with this conversation. I really appreciate you joining me and having your questions here, and I hope that it's been helpful for those who are new to Fast-5 and new to intermittent fasting. And please visit me online at bertherring.com for more information. There's lots of little video segments you can look at, the blog, and also join us on Facebook at the Fast-5 group, which is called the Fast-5 Diet and Lifestyle. Thanks again for joining. I hope you enjoy your coffee and the rest of your day. Well, take care. Bye-bye.